I'll give you the ending, first the part folks lean in for. The American Legion Hall in Lancaster smelled like sheet cake and coffee. The DJ's mic popped, and when I stepped through the doorway in a plain navy dress, his bride went pale and screamed, "What the hell? She's the daughter you told me was dead." My father couldn't find his mouth for words. That's where we're headed. 4 months earlier, it was rain and a shoulder of US 33 and the red taillights of my dad's Ford F-150 wobbling away. The cab smelled like chain oil and wintergreen. He'd driven in silence nearly an hour, knuckles tight on the wheel. We passed a mile marker 80 from my apartment in Athens, and he jerked onto the shoulder, hard enough my duffel slid and thumped my shin. He didn't look at me when he said it. "Your mom's dead, so you should be too." Then he popped the locks and waited. I stepped into the rain. My boots sank. Spray from a semi spattered my jacket. He set my duffel on the gravel, closed the passenger door soft, and drove off like a man leaving a store. People expect yelling. I didn't yell. I stood with the rain finding the back of my neck and watched the last red blink fade. "Okay," I said out loud to no one. "You learn habits you don't unlearn." I tied my hair back with a rubber band from my wrist. Checked pockets phone at 8% folded 21 of mom's bobby pins, a laminated blood type card. I put the phone in airplane mode. I dragged the duffel to the guardrail and sat. Rain ticked on the metal like a watch. I counted breaths in fours, the way they taught us to slow a pulse before sticking a vein. It didn't make me warm, but it kept my hands from shaking. Traffic thinned. The storm settled. I wrung my socks and pulled them back on. Wet and warm beats wet and cold. I looked at the mile marker again. Green sign, white numbers, something to hold on to. I thought of Mom. Not the hospital mom, but the Saturday morning one with flour on her forearms. She never talked about Dad when he was mean, only when he was good. "Everybody's got 2 dogs in them," she'd say, rinsing a plate. "You feed the one you want to keep." I wondered what dog was eating him now. Headlights came and went. I didn't stick my thumb out. Pride is a foolish blanket, but it's the one I had. Also, stranger danger isn't just for kids. I was cold and mad in a quiet way that doesn't splash. A sign ahead promised a gas station and diner in 6 miles. The rain eased to a mist. I slung the duffel and started walking the shoulder-facing traffic, letting the beam of each car paint me and pass. My right boot rubbed a hot spot. I adjusted the laces the way Ortega showed me, double wrap, keep pressure even. There's a rhythm to misery crunch of gravel, hiss of tires, slap of wet cuff against calf. I cataloged what I could control, posture, breath, speed. What I couldn't weather distance, a father's old grudges. The air smelled like creosote and wet dirt. At the overpass, I ducked down the bank to get out of the wind and listen to the storm think itself over on the concrete. I opened the duffel and did an inventory by touch PT shirt, spare socks in a Ziploc, a field notebook, a pen that still clicked the paperback Mom left on my counter the month before she got sick. I put the book back. I didn't want other people's words. My phone pulsed once. A voicemail icon from a number I didn't know. I ignored it. If it was trouble, it could wait. If it was help, it would still be help at dawn. I tried on a few sentences, I might say, if I ever said anything to him about what he said to me. "You don't get to use her to throw me away. Don't make the dead agree with you. Nothing fit. Tools matter. You don't swing a torque wrench at a nail." A freight train moaned. I pictured the map Lancaster behind Nelsonville, ahead Athens beyond. The diner sign would be yellow. Coffee that argues back a waitress who calls you honey without meaning a thing by it. I started walking when the sky traded black for bruised gray. My feet moved past, hurting into a floaty numb I knew not to trust. 10 steps then, 10 more. Stretch calves against the guardrail. The rain thinned to silver specks in the first light. "Soldier," I said to myself, not loud and not kind, just to hear a word that didn't belong to him. The backs of my knees ached. My shoulders sang dull from the duffel. The road didn't care. At the ramp, the asphalt opened into a dark fan where trucks had tracked oil and water. I could smell fryer grease before I saw the building. And there it was, humming by its own light. A diner, not fancy, a stripe of neon half-dead over the door, a hand-lettered sign promising biscuits and gravy all day. A man in a camo hat smoked under the awning and nodded once. I wiped my face with my sleeve, set the duffel down, and pressed my palm to the cool metal door. Inside there would be a bathroom with a loud hand-dryer coffee in a heavy mug, a booth with duct tape on the seat and somebody willing to pour and not ask more than 2 questions. I thought about calling 911 just to log it. I didn't. I didn't want to report. I wanted breakfast and a plan I could write in ink, one built with time and copies and signatures that hold up when a man says a thing out loud and the town has to decide if that's who he is. The bell chimed. Warmth hit my face. I stood a second, let my glasses clear, and told myself soft as a prayer, walk it off, Ray. We're not done. The diner never really went dark. Fluorescents hummed. The open sign blinked and heat rolled off the flat top. I took a window booth so I could watch my duffel. Habit. The waitress's tag said, Sharon. Coffee, she asked, already pouring. Yes, ma'am. Restrooms back there, she said, chin pointing. You can leave your bag. Nobody's running in this rain. I'll keep it close. The mug was heavy and chipped. Good coffee. I switched my phone on long enough to text Ortega, you up? He sent a thumbs up. Then, where I replied with the mile marker and a photo of the yellow sign. He wrote back 40. Sharon slid a laminated menu over. Biscuits and gravies, worth the sin. 2 eggs over wheat toast, and the sin. In the restroom, I dried my hands under the noisy blower and looked in the mirror. Road grit, rain freckles. Mom would have pressed a cold spoon to my eyes and told me to drink water. When I came out, Ortega's head bobbed past the window. He slid into the booth hoodie, damp grin, tired. You look like a recruit who fell asleep in a car wash. Good morning to you too. Coffee and whatever she had, he told Sharon. She had the sin, she said. You want your own Han, or you two sharing poor choices. Own. Doubles. He looked at me asking without words. I shook my head. Not here. We ate, paid, and stepped into mist. His Civic smelled like pine and dog hair. He drove a mile before speaking. Your dad? Yeah. You want me mad or quiet? Quiet for now. He nodded. Fields slid by. Billboards told us to repent or buy fireworks. The sky thinned. At my Athens apartment, I showered fast, changed into dry clothes. Ortega made coffee like he'd done it before. On the fridge, a church flyer Ruth Ann had left was pinned with a cow magnet. At the bottom, stop by when you can, R.A.P. I need to see her, I said. Want me to drive? Please. Ruth Ann lived 2 streets over in a 1-story with aluminum awnings. She opened before we knocked and hugged me hard. Coffee's on. We sat at her breakfast table. A Bible lay open under a pair of readers. She set down a tin of butter cookies. I have something for you, she said. Your mama gave it to me last spring. Said to wait till you asked. She brought a manila envelope with my name in Mom's careful hand. Inside a letter stamped copies and a Polaroid of the Hazel Street house with the big maple. I read the letter first. Mom wrote about filing a transfer on death deed for the house to save us trouble. Then, if he ever tries to erase you, baby, don't let him. Truth lives on paper as much as in the heart. Use both. The copies were deed pages with her signature and recorder's stamp. There was also a printout of withdrawals from an old joint account I thought was closed small, then bigger. Ruth Ann watched without questions. Ortega stirred his coffee. Who's Kaylee, I asked. Kaylee Hart, Ruth Ann said. Teaches a stretching class at the community center. Helps at church. Sweet girl. Green as spring. She and your daddy? She stopped. Legion Hall's booked. First Saturday in June. I opened my field notebook. 2 headings, paper and people. Under paper, deed gets certified, bank statements, Mom's letter. Under people, Ruth Ann, Reverend Harmon, Clerk Denise. Kaylee approached soft. Ruth Ann touched my wrist. Are you going to start a fire? No, ma'am, I said. I'm going to turn on the lights. At the county building, Denise still worked behind the glass. She recognized Ortega and joked about his haircut. When I asked for certified copies, she got the careful clerk face. $2 a page, she said. Keep the receipt. Outside, the air smelled washed and new. Ortega handed me the envelope with raised seals. You sure about seeing the girl? I'm sure about listening, I said. The community center sat behind the library cinder block painted cheerful yellow. In the lobby, a corkboard advertised a fish fry, a lost cat, and gentle stretch with Kaylee 2's thurs. Through the gym window, I watched her finish class ponytail earnest voice. The kind of person Mom would have told me to be kind to on purpose. When the room cleared, I stepped in with a water bottle like a truce. Good class, I said. She smiled, a little wary. Thanks. You new to town? Sort of, I said. Name's Lee. Kaylee, she said, laughing at the rhyme. I've got 20 minutes before I help in the office. Coffee. We crossed to the cafe by the library. Fluorescence bulletin board fundraiser jars. She ordered vanilla. I took plain coffee. We sat by the window. So, Lee, she said, what brings you to Athens? Work mostly. Family's complicated. Mine too. She hesitated. Then, I'm getting married. June. He's older. People have opinions. People always do, I said. He says his daughter passed years ago, she said softly. I never know what to say to that. I'm sorry, feels small. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it more than one way. She stirred. Do you know a good realtor? The house we're looking at is on Hazel Street. Cute big maple. He said it used to be his. I took a breath that didn't show. Hazel's a good street, I said. Maples keep a house cool. She smiled. That's what he said. We finished our cups. She had to log invoices at church. I told her I'd see her Thursday for class. She waved like we were already friends. On the way out, I texted Ortega one word, listening. I kept the name Lee in my mouth like a pebble you don't swallow. It made talk easier and kept one step between what I felt and what I showed. On Thursday, I rolled a mat into the corner of Kaylee's class and let my hamstrings argue. She coached breath in that gentle voice folks use with skittish horses. Afterward, she pressed a church fundraiser flyer and a First Baptist pen into my hand. I told her I could help in the office if they needed someone who knew their way around a copier and a coffee pot. 4 months is forever if you wait, but short if you build. I started with paper. Denise at the recorder's office pressed a gold seal onto Mom's transfer on death deed firm, enough to leave a ridge. At the bank, a clerk with a too-short tie said the old joint account was reconciled, which is bank for money went somewhere. I requested statements for in-person pickup and wrote the date in ink on an index card I slid behind Mom's letter. Paper doesn't care who's loudest. It just sits there and outlives you. The American Legion Hall had a plywood sign someone repaints every spring. Inside polite tan walls, a short bar, a tall flag, a corkboard, advertising meatloaf night, and a blood drive. A flyer by the door said, June wedding hall reserved. When you've sat through enough briefings, you do math without thinking. Entrances, exits, sightlines where the mic will pop. An older man in a red cap glanced up. You looking for bingo? He asked. Just reading, I said. And I was. Even empty the room already smelled like sheet cake and coffee. At home, I made a binder, cheap 3-ring tabs cut from masking tape. Paper on one side, people on the other, under paper deed copies. Mom's letter in a sleeve, a tab labeled Bank. Under people, Ruth Ann Rever, Bill Harmon, Denise Brenda from the Legion, and Kaylee circled with a note in block letters, Not the Enemy. I slid a church directory Ruth Ann had handed me into the pocket and stuck a pencil through the rings the way Mom used to when she meant business. I saw Kaylee twice a week. We kept it small tires casseroles, the way Ohio keeps 1 foot in winter, clear into April. She mentioned a dress to him and a cousin who wouldn't RSVP. In the church office, a woman with a cardigan asked if I could stack hymnals. I stacked hymnals while Kaylee sorted pledge envelopes. He wants the Legion Hall, she said. His buddies feel at home there. I've never been. Does it smell like smoke sheet cake and coffee? I said. She laughed and we moved another stack. I kept questions small and ears open. Was he married before I asked it, like weather? Just once she said. She passed. Any kids? He told me his daughter died young, a crease set between her eyebrows. I never know how to talk to that. You say, I'm sorry, I said, and forgive yourself for not knowing more. She nodded, wrote candles on a list, and asked if plastic flutes were tacky. Tacky's fine if folks can grip them, I said, thinking of veterans with shaky hands who don't want to drop glass. The statements came rubber-banded in a big envelope. Ortega and I spread them on my kitchen table with a pocket calculator and a yellow pad. Withdrawals had a rhythm, small cash, then fatter cashier's checks that landed on Fridays. 2 notes read, "Deposit Chuck's small engines in a clerk's neat hand." Ortega tapped a column. "Keeping the lights on?" "Maybe," I said, "or moving money to look like that." We didn't make speeches. We made columns and totals and neat hash marks until the picture felt honest enough to stand up by itself. Mom's letter stayed by my elbow. I read it when I wanted to dramatize. Her handwriting slowed me down. Truth lives on paper as much as in the heart. Use both. I pictured her at the sink, the maple outside flicking green the way it does when a breeze walks through. Ruth Ann called to ask if I'd eaten. I said yes and meant it. You keep your blood sugar steady when you're building anything that matters. We visited Reverend Harmon on a Tuesday. His office smelled like coffee and lemon oil. Diplomas on the wall said he'd done the work. He listened more than he spoke. When I showed him the deed copies, he set his glasses higher and read every line. "I sat with your mother when she signed this," he said. "She worried about hassle, not spite. She didn't expect Charles to be cruel." He folded his hands. "I regret not anticipating it. I'm not here for punishment," I said. "I'm here for a light switch." He nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Your eyes when the room wants to argue with the paper." "You have them," he said. He wrote a statement in his own hand, slid it into a legal envelope, dated it, and put it on a shelf. "When it's time, I'll speak to what I know." Some days looked like nothing, work clock out, laundry boots by the door, but the quiet work still counted. Ruth Ann taught me to thread her old Singer and let me finish the quilt top Mom started. I stitched while the radio said the Reds lost by 1. Usefulness doesn't always have a spotlight. Kaylee called vendors from the church office. "He won't let me see the guest list," she said, half smiling. "Says it's a surprise." "Surprises are better when they're small," I said, and she wrote "no sparklers" on a sticky note. On a Wednesday, I walked Hazel Street. The bungalow's paint needed a spring coat. The maple held early green, the kind that looks whispered on. The porch steps sagged like an old couch. Under the rail, my fingers found the nail Dad used for Christmas lights. 15 and 32 crowded the same breath. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Some places walk into you. I took a picture from the sidewalk and slid it into the binder behind the deed. Kaylee texted shoe photos. "Too much?" "If you're asking, they're too much," she sent a laughing face. The next day at the library cafe, she said, "I like you, Lee. You don't make me feel dumb when I don't know things." "I don't know a lot either," I said. "I'm just good with lists." She told me a venue mix-up almost cost her deposit. "He fixed it with a phone call," she said, impressed. "I filed that under people who answers to him and who he calls when he wants things easy." Back at the Legion, Brenda ran a finger down the calendar. "We don't do fancy," she said, "but we do on time. First Saturday in June, 7 till the DJ gets tired." The DJ, she said, was a friend of Chuck's who played oldies loud enough to make the cake tremble. I stood in the empty hall while they vacuumed. I pictured chairs, a cheap arch plastic flutes, the microphone that pops if you touch it wrong. I pictured where I'd stand to keep my hands from shaking and where Kaylee would see me first. I didn't rehearse words. Rooms this size don't need big speeches, they need plain ones. At night, I allowed myself 10 minutes to be mad. I set a timer like eggs. When it beeped, I made tea and scratched the porch cat that had adopted me. Anger is a tool, not a home. You hang it back on the pegboard. A week out, Ortega drove me past the place the rain began and the shoulder where I sat. "You want to get out?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's a mile marker. I've got better ones now." He drummed his fingers on the wheel and said nothing, which was the gift I needed. On the last Thursday before the wedding class ended early, Kaylee was jumpy and kind. "I keep thinking I'm missing something," she said. "Like I left an iron on." I wanted to tell her she hadn't missed anything. It had been hidden on purpose. Instead, I helped her roll mats. Got a plan for people who hug too hard, I asked. No, she said, smiling. Bend first, I said. They can't knock you off if you're not straight up. She blinked, then laughed. That's good. Write it down. I did in my field notebook under people prepare her landing. 4 months is enough to build something that stands. You measure twice. Set posts in concrete. Let it cure. The wedding would be somebody's first day of summer. On mine, it would be the day the porch finally had a roof shade enough to sit under, even if the weather was a man's voice. Truth isn't loud, it's stubborn. It sits on a table under a lamp, and when folks come around to argue with it, it doesn't move. That's what I told myself the week before the wedding, while I cleared my kitchen table and made a war room out of a 3-ring binder and a coffee mug. I wrote truth at the top of a yellow pad. Under that 2 columns, paper and people. Ortega said it looked like football plays. I said it was closer to plumbing. He laughed and sharpened a pencil with his pocket knife. Paper first. I drove to the recorder's office on a Wednesday morning when the lobby still smelled like floor cleaner. Denise slid open the glass and pushed the heavy book at me. You want additional certified copies or just the 2, she asked. 2 more, I said. She worked the embosser with both hands until the gold seals sat proud as dimes. Keep them flat, she said, laying tissue between the pages. Heat warps truth. At the bank, the clerk with the short tie had a name Evan. He remembered me from the statements request and walked them out in a thick envelope with my driver's license on top. It's all there, he said. You'll see the pattern. He didn't say what pattern. He didn't have to. In the car, I cracked the seal and read with the radio off. Cashier's checks regular as Friday fish fry. Cash withdrawals before holidays. A deposit labeled shop that looked more like a pass-through than a pay stub. I didn't underline anything. Paper doesn't need my emphasis. I added Mom's letter to a clear sleeve with a note in block letters, read first if they try to talk over you. Then I wrote a 1-paragraph statement in my own hand, simple and short, I am Rachel Morgan. My mother, Ann Morgan, filed the attached deed. I am not dead, estranged, or invisible. I am here to tell the truth about my family, no more and no less. I folded it once and slid it behind Mom's pages. People next. I met Reverend Bill Harmon at his office when the church hallway still smelled like Murphy's oil soap. He poured coffee into mismatched mugs and set his elbows on the desk. I handed him a slim manila envelope with the deed copy and Mom's letter and kept 2 copies in my bag. If I hand this to you Saturday, you'll read it? I asked. I will, he said. Plain as paper. He wrote his own note on church letterhead about being present. When Mom signed, dated it, sealed it, and tucked it into a drawer. I'll bring it with me, he said. Sometimes folks need to borrow your backbone. I'm good for that. I stopped at the vet center on State Street because paperwork wasn't the only kind of truth I needed. The receptionist had lacquered hair and a soft voice. She pointed me toward a counselor named Jerry Gerald Cole, who wore a polo with a tiny flag on the chest and listened with his whole face. I told him the short version. He didn't blink at the long quiets. You want advice, he asked when I was done. I want to do this without turning myself into the thing I'm fighting. Then pick your target, he said. Is it humiliation or accountability? Accountability, I said, and let the word settle. Good, he said. Humiliation's a bonfire. Accountability's a porch light. One burns fast. One keeps shining. I asked about GI Bill benefits and VA home loans, not because I planned to use them Saturday, but because I wanted my own steps under me. He printed a sheet and boxed 3 dates in red. These are deadlines, he said. Truth's got deadlines too. On my way home, I stopped at a consignment shop on East State where old lives hang on racks. A woman in a denim apron rang a brass bell when I brought Mom's quilt off layaway. You're the daughter, she said, not like a question. She was a sweet thing, talked about porch swings like they were church. She did, I said, and walked out with the quilt folded over my arm, the weight of it, more memory than cotton. Back at my apartment, I laid everything out on the table and rehearsed without sound. Walk in. Don't hurry. Find Kaylee's eyes first. Let her know with your face she isn't the target. If she speaks, listen. If the room gets loud, Hand the envelope to the Reverend and let him read. If Dad tries to wedge himself between paper and people, keep your hands at your sides. You're not there to fight. You're there to tell. Ortega came by after shift and watched me move through it again. You sure you don't want to make a speech? He asked. Folks love speeches. Speeches are for when you're selling something, I said. I'm not selling. I'm showing. He opened the fridge, found a jar of pickles, and leaned against the counter. What do you want to happen? I want the lie to stop traveling, I said. He can do what he does with himself after that. Okay, he said. Then write the 2 sentences you can live with and nothing more. I did on an index card. I am Rachel. This is my mother's letter and the deed she signed. Then another. I'm not here to hurt you, Kaylee. I'm here to stand in my own name. Ruth Ann came over with a sack of oranges and a tin of sewing notions. She sat while I stitched the last row of the quilt top and told a story about Mom wrecking a pie and serving it anyway because whipped cream forgives many sins. When I showed her the binder, she touched the gold seals with a finger. That's neat work, she said. Your mama would approve your corners. We talked about the Legion Hall. She'd been to every fish fry they'd put on since '98. Folks know how to sit and listen in that room, she said. They might not clap when you wish they would, but they don't throw tomatoes either. Do you think they'll let me in? I asked, not scared, just practical. You're his daughter, she said. And I'm your +1 if anybody asks. She winked and patted my hand. Besides, Brenda likes me. When I couldn't sleep, I went to Hazel Street and stood on the sidewalk while the porch light burned like a small, stubborn star. The maple shook its hands in a soft wind. I pictured a child version of me tracing the grain in the railing with a quarter. I pictured Mom hanging lights in December and Dad pretending to hate it. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel dread. I felt ready in the way you feel ready to change a tire hands, know where the lug wrench is. Mine knows it's going to be a little cold on the asphalt. Friday. I ironed a plain navy dress and pinned my dog tags inside the lining where they'd sit cool against my skin. I put the binder in a grocery sack so it would look ordinary. I taped my 2 sentences to the inside cover. I put Mom's letter in an envelope with her name facing up, so the first thing anyone saw would be her handwriting, not mine. I drove to the Legion Hall and sat in the lot at dusk while the janitor propped the door and hosed the cigarette butts from the mulch. Brenda came out in a sweatshirt and waved like we'd met 50 times. 7 sharp, she said. DJ's bringing an extra mic. He always does. It pops if you tap it. I nodded and made a note. Don't touch the mic. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery for a small bouquet of grocery store flowers, because Mom liked the ones that pretended hard. The cashier rang them up without looking at me, tired in the way end of shift gets. Big night, she asked. Tomorrow, I said. Sleep came in parts. When I woke at 4, I made coffee and buttered toast and sat with the binder open, not reading, just letting the weight of it argue with the part of me that still wanted to shout. I pressed my palm to the cover and said Mom's name, once the way you test a name to make sure it still fits. Truth isn't a hammer. It's a level. You set it down and see which way the bubble leans. If the floor's off, you don't yell at the bubble. You fix the floor. Saturday would be for setting things down where everyone could see them and letting the room decide how crooked it wanted to be. The American Legion Hall sits low and square between a used car lot and a tire place, the flag puffing out on its pole like a lung taking a slow breath. By 7, the lot was full. String lights made the wet asphalt look like a lake. Ruth Ann rode with me and tucked a tissue up her sleeve like armor. I had the binder in a grocery sack and my 2 sentences taped inside the cover. I could feel my dog tags cool against my ribs, where I'd pinned them in the lining of the dress. Inside smelled like coffee floor wax and sheet cake. Brenda waved us past the sign-in table. You ladies look fine, she said. A DJ in a polo was lining up oldies. On the corkboard, Polaroids from the last fish fry curled at the edges. Folding chairs were set in rows. The bar had a stack of plastic flutes leaning against a jug of ginger ale. It looked like every hall I've ever stood in birthdays. Funerals, potlucks, rooms built for ordinary joy and ordinary grief. Kaylee stood near the cake, talking to a cousin in a too-tight suit. Her dress was simple lace hair in a bun she'd probably watched 3 videos to get right. When she saw me, It took a beat for the name in her head, Lee to fight the shape of the face in front of her me. She went pale. Her mouth opened and the sound came out clean and hard like a screen door slamming. What the hell? She's the daughter you told me was dead. The room did what rooms do when they hear something they weren't built to hold. A fork hit the floor. The DJ flinched and the mic popped. Somebody said, "Lord?" Somebody else whispered Anne's girl and said my mother's name like a prayer twice. My father turned slow, like a man working out if he knows a person at the grocery. His tux fit, but didn't belong to him. For a second, he looked 35 again, the year he stood on our porch with a toolbox and a sunburn and said he'd fix the leak when we can afford new shingles. Then the old set came into his jaw, the one I knew from Bad Saturdays. He tried on 3 expressions, and none of them fit either. I didn't walk fast. You don't rush truth. I put my palm out to Kaylee and let her see my face first, no heat, because I wasn't there to take her apart. You didn't know? I said. She shook her head once, tears already shining. She pressed a hand to her mouth and took one step back from my father like he'd become a stove she couldn't trust. Ruth Ann was an anchor at my shoulder, not touching me, just willing the floor to stay still. I turned to Reverend Harmon, who had been standing near the arch with a folded program. "Reverend," I said. He understood the job before I finished the word. I handed him the envelope with Mom's letter and one certified deed copy. He put on his glasses like a man putting on work gloves. "Friends," he said, not loud, but the room heard him. "A truth needs daylight." Ann Morgan wrote this letter in my office. I watched her sign these papers at the recorder's office in this county. I'll read a little. He didn't take the mic. He didn't need to. The room had already given him its ears. He read Mom's handwriting, plain her wanting to spare us courtrooms, her naming me as her child, her naming the Hazel Street house as mine when she was gone. One line cleared its throat in my chest. If he ever marries again, let him do it in the light of the truth that he has a daughter, and that our home remains our daughter's, and that erasing a child is not something a man can do with his mouth. He folded the letter and held up the deed so the gold seal caught the string lights. "These are certified," he said. "Filed and recorded." My father made a scoffing sound. "This is a stunt," he said. It came out thin. Denise's husband, who I only knew from his Carhartt jacket and the way he chewed each word like it had to be tested, stepped forward 2 inches. "That's my wife's stamp," he said. "County, don't stamp stunts." From the back, Brenda clicked the music off. The guitar on the oldies died like a TV going to snow. You could hear a baby fuss and someone whisper, "That's Anne's hand, sure as I'm standing here." I opened the binder and saw my index card, and the sentences I'd practiced until they weren't a speech anymore. "I'm Rachel," I said. "This is my mother's letter and the deed she signed." I didn't say the 80 miles or the rain or the line he'd used like a rock in a sock. The room didn't need my weather. It needed a beam across 2 posts. I turned to Kaylee and made sure she had the next thing. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said. "I'm here to stand in my own name." She looked at me the way a person looks at a map they finally trust. Then she looked at my father, and the look shifted. It wasn't dramatics. It was a math problem solving itself. She took off her bouquet and set it on the bar like a woman putting down a thing that turned out not to belong to her. My father tried another angle. "She's estranged," he told the room. "It's complicated." "Estranged people aren't dead?" A Legion old-timer said, not unkind. He had a white flat top and a jacket full of pins. He set his hat over his heart like a man making an oath to himself. The DJ lifted the mic and it popped again. He set it down like it bit him. No one laughed. It wasn't that kind of night. Reverend Harmon didn't sermonize. He said, "We can continue this celebration with the truth in the open, or we can take a pause and let folks breathe. Either way, this young woman is Anne's daughter, and that is that." Ruth Ann reached for a napkin and tucked it under the cake plate because she's the sort to keep frosting from staining a table no matter what else is going on. Ortega stood by the door, arms crossed, staying out of the light unless asked to stand in it. My father looked at the floor, then at the ceiling as if an answer might be hidden in the ductwork. "This is supposed to be my day," he said. It can still be a day, Reverend Harmon said, but lies don't keep. Kaylee spoke then, steady even, with her hands shaking. Why did you tell me she was dead, she asked him. Not dramatic, just wanting to know how to live the next minute. He didn't have a clean answer ready. Honesty is a muscle he hasn't worked. He shrugged that old shrug, the one that fixes lawnmowers and marriages the same way with duct tape and denial. It didn't stick to this. I handed Brenda the second deed copy and asked her to keep it behind the bar until the end of the night. So nobody says it vanished, I said. She slid it into a drawer with a roll of raffle tickets and nodded once, like a notary without the stamp. I didn't make a speech. I didn't take a bow. I stood until the room caught its breath and found its normal noises again. Chairs scooting a cousin, asking where to put the gifts, someone saying the coffee was strong. Truth had taken the head table, and there wasn't anything left for me to force. When I turned to go, the old-timer with the pins gave me a quick nod that meant I'd done enough. Kaylee touched my wrist light as a moth. Thank you, she said, for not making it about me. It was never about you, I said and meant it, and stepped into the hallway that smelled like mop water and waxed the kind of smell that says, people try even when they don't get it right every time. Outside the night had that damp Midwestern chill that gets in your cuffs. The string lights buzzed. The parking lot was a scatter of wet reflections and cigarette ends. Folks did what folks do after a shock. They looked for jobs. One man moved chairs against the wall because chairs needed moving. Someone boxed leftovers. The DJ rapped a chord like it had personally offended him. You could feel people deciding what part of the story would be theirs. Kaylee came out with her bouquetless hands and stood under the awning where rain fringed the edge like beads. Her mascara hadn't run. She looked like someone who'd put a cake in the oven and found the dial was wrong and dinner would be something else now. I don't know what to do with the rest of the night, she said. Go home with your cousin, I said. Sleep. Change your password. Call the florist in the morning. She nodded, the practical landing where feelings can't live yet. He told me he was lonely, she said. He said he couldn't bear more loss. I believe the lonely part, I said. It doesn't have to be a weapon. The old Legion man with the flat top stepped past us, tipped his hat, and kept walking his wife tight to his elbow. From the doorway, Brenda said to nobody and everybody, kitchen's closed. Coffee's still hot. That's how small towns end big nights, with something warm you pour yourself. Ruth Ann came out with my grocery sack binder and asked if I wanted her to carry it. I shook my head and took the weight back. You did neat work, she said, the way she might talk about straight seams. Now the edges won't fray as easy. Ortega leaned on the hood of his Civic and gave me the look that means a question without words. I answered the same way. He flipped his keys in his palm and scanned the lot for trouble. There wasn't any. Trouble had been talked out of its good shoes and sent home. Chuck stood by the flagpole, half in shadow, shoulders up around his ears. He looked smaller than a tux should allow. After a time, he walked toward us like a man practicing normal. He didn't meet my eyes. You could have called, he said. I did, I said, because telling the truth doesn't stop just because the letter's read. You let it go to voicemail. He grimaced like the word itself tasted bad. You made a scene. I brought daylight, I said. If it burned, that's because of what it touched. He dragged a hand down his face. You think you did something noble. I think Mom asked me to put the paper on the table, I said. I did that. I could feel the dog tags cool through the dress, lining a small coin of steadiness. Kaylee watched his face the way you watch the forecast that decides if you cancel the picnic. Why did you say she was dead? She asked again, soft, not for an audience. He shifted. It was easier. For you, I said. He didn't argue. When truth lands, even stubborn men can feel it in their ankles. I didn't want to conduct a tribunal under string lights. The porch light speech would be tomorrow if it came. I'm going, I said to Ruth Ann. She hooked her arm through mine and we walked toward the car. On the way, Denise's husband, Carhartt jacket, clean hands, gave me a small nod. Not a salute, not a big thing. Just a man saying paper matters. We drove home, mostly quiet wipers talking to themselves. At Ruth Ann's place, I walked her in. Her living room held a lamp that made the family pictures look warmer than they were. She pressed 2 oatmeal cookies into my hand like we were trading artifacts. Sleep at my place, she said. I'll do better in my own bed, I said. Call you in the morning? At my apartment, I put the binder on the table the way you set down a toolbox after a job. The porch cat jumped to the sill and asked his usual question. I gave him a saucer of milk and told him tonight's news short. He didn't seem surprised. I slept like someone had turned a dial. In the morning, the air felt clearer, as if the room had exhaled. I made eggs buttered toast and carried my plate to the porch. A mockingbird practiced other birds' songs from the telephone line. I let him borrow my quiet. By 10, I drove past the Legion. The parking lot was empty except for one minivan and a church van that hadn't remembered itself yet. Inside the front door, a smell of lemon and coffee. Brenda pushed a mop. Morning, she said, like nothing unusual had ever happened in that building. Maybe she was right. Truth isn't unusual. It's just unwelcome when you've been decorating around the hole. I took Hazel Street slow. The maple flickered new light through itself. A man in a green truck waved like we'd been waving 20 years. I parked, sat in the driver's seat, and counted to 30. You can't mourn and gloat at the same time. Something gets cheapened. I put my hand on the steering wheel and said Mom's name. It made the air better. Chuck's shop sat on the edge of town. Cinder block and corrugated roof, the O in open burned out on the sign, so it read, Pen. This morning, the cardboard closed was slung sideways in the window. A guy I knew from the diner, Ron with the calf tattoo, stood outside with a trimmer. He lifted his chin at me. We're shut, he said. Y'all okay? I asked. He smiled with half his mouth. Boss is figuring things. He looked through the window like the answers might be hung on pegboard. The bell rang when I pushed the door. Chuck was behind the counter, elbows on the glass eyes on the register, like it might tell him something about his soul. He didn't look up until the bell's echo died. I'm not here to fight, I said. I'm here to hand you your copy. I slid the envelope across. He didn't touch it. I know what it says, he said. Knowing and holding are different, I said. Hold it. He picked it up like it might bite. The gold seal caught the thin light and threw it back at his chin. He set it down again, careful. You made me a villain. I didn't make you anything, I said. I uncovered you. He opened his mouth, closed it. Kaylee's not answering. She will, I said. Give her a day. Then tell the truth the first time she asks, and every time after. That's your way out. He scoffed. Out of what? Out of being the man who lies about his own blood, I said, and kept my voice as plain as a clerk's. You want to be lonely, honest. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Men look up when they don't want to look in. Why'd you come? He asked. So you don't tell yourself I ruined your life. And vanish, I said. So you hear me say the word boundary with your own ears. Boundary, he repeated like checking the fit of a wrench on a bolt. You don't call me to argue. You don't use Mom's name like a weapon. If you want to talk, you write a letter that starts with the truth you owe other people and ends with the apology you owe me. I tapped the envelope. You know the address. It's on the deed. He stared at his hands. Grease lived in the lines the way regret lives in old habits. A customer walked in, then bell jangling. Ron moved to the counter, grateful for something with numbers. I turned to go. Ray, Chuck said. He hadn't said my name clean in months. It sounded like it used to before he learned how to make it a problem. Yeah, I said. You look like your mother on a day she decided to paint the kitchen, he said. It wasn't an apology. It was the truest thing he had access to. Then you know what comes next? I said. You move the stove and lay down drop cloths. It's messy and takes all day. But the room gets brighter. Outside, the sun had burned off the slick from the pavement. A train horn carried from the river. I got in my car and sat with my hands on the wheel dog tags, cold through the dress lining under my jacket, where I'd pinned them and forgotten. I thought about porch lights and bonfires, about rooms that can hold the truth if you give them chairs and time. On my way back to Athens, I stopped at Ruth Ann's with groceries. She was shelling peas at the sink. Well, she asked. He held the paper, I said. It didn't bite him. Might leave a mark. She nodded, like stitches had landed where they should. Hungry? She asked. Yes, ma'am. We ate ham sandwiches and chips and didn't talk much. You don't need to narrate a good day. It holds itself up. That night, I carried Mom's quilt to Hazel Street and sat on the porch steps, while the neighborhood did evening dogs a basketball thump a kid calling from a yard. I wasn't counting wins. I was counting breaths slow, and even the way you do when you want to own your body again after it's been borrowed by someone else's weather. The porch light clicked on with the dusk. I let it be what it was, a small, ordinary miracle that doesn't brag. Morning. Put a clean shirt on the street. The maple outside the Hazel Street bungalow moved slow, like a person stretching before coffee. I sat on the porch step with Mom's quilt around my knees and a mug that said, "World's okayest cook." The air smelled like cut grass and toast from somebody else's kitchen. A mockingbird tried out 3 other birds' songs, none of them wrong. I rubbed the smooth spot on the railing where a quarter used to ride when I was small. Ruth Ann came by in her house shoes, with a plate covered in foil. Egg casserole. Don't you dare pretend you ate. She sat, looked at the yard like it had a story to tell, and patted my wrist once. You did it right, she said. Not fancy. Right? We ate warm bites off paper plates. Forks clinked. No need to narrate a good morning. When she left, I swept the porch just because. Some chores or prayers. The broom lifted last night's pollen and 1 cigarette butt the wind had delivered. I was thinking about replacing the loose step when a pickup eased to the curb. Chuck got out like a man testing ice. No tux, just a work shirt with his name patch knees, white with old dust. He held a plain envelope and a bag from the hardware store. He looked at the house like it might remember him out loud. I brought hinges, he said, holding up the bag. Front bedroom squeaks. You'll need a screwdriver, I said. He nodded and didn't move to the door. I started a letter. He lifted the envelope an inch. It's not done. Good, I said. Letters should take time when they're heavy. He sat on the second step, left a space between us, and set the envelope on his knee. We listened to a mower 2 yards over. He cleared his throat. I don't know what to call yesterday. Truth in public, I said. You can call it that. He turned the envelope in his hands. I told folks you were gone because it was easier to fix one kind of talk with another. He shook his head. That sounds right in my mouth and wrong in the air. It's wrong in both, I said, not to punish, just to keep the floor level. He tried an apology, the kind that dodges. I'm sorry, you... No, I said, soft but square. Say, I'm sorry I said you were dead. Then say, I'm sorry I left you on the road. He stared at the nail head in the step, like it could feed him the words. I'm sorry I said you were dead, he managed. A breath later, I'm sorry I left you on the road. The porch took the weight without creaking. You tell Kaylee, I said. You tell Reverend Harmon. You tell Brenda and the boys at the Legion. And you don't say it to get a pat on the back for telling it. You say it because it's true. He nodded, the kind that moves a fraction and means a mile. I'll finish the letter, he said. I'll mail it. I reached into the basket by the door and handed him a stamped envelope with my address on it. When you mean it, I said. He tucked his unfinished one inside like a promise to himself. He stood bag rattling. You keeping the tree? He asked, looking up through the maple like there might be advice hung in it. Of course, I said. It keeps the porch cooler. He nodded again, a small, ordinary agreement, one of the first we'd had in a long time. Hinges are in the bag, he said, and went down the steps slow, like a man learning how to use his legs again. By noon, the sun had taken charge. I changed into work jeans and a t-shirt and sorted a box for Kaylee on the kitchen table. Copies of vendor receipts from the church office, a list of customer service numbers, the number for the bank's fraud department, Reverend Harmon's card, the vet center sheet. Jerry had boxed in red, and a note in my plain handwriting. You don't owe him your piece. Start with your passwords. Hydrate. Eat. Call Ruth Ann if the world wobbles. At 2, Kaylee texted, Can I come by? I sent the address, and then stood looking at the living room like I might put out nicer coasters for an honesty visit. When she arrived, she looked young and older at the same time. No makeup, hair in a knot that had given up halfway. I didn't know, she said in the doorway voice, rough with sleep and crying. I'm so embarrassed. You don't owe me an apology for being lied to, I said. Come sit. She sat on the couch like it might break. I gave her the box. She read the note, then lifted each item like a tool she'd been told she could handle. I told my cousin I wasn't going back, she said. At least not to pack when he's there. Good, I said. Bring a friend. Take pictures of the meter. Turn off location sharing. Block what needs blocking until your hands stop shaking. She laughed once without humor, then startled herself by meaning it. You talk like a checklist. I am a checklist, I said. It's how I don't drown. She looked around the room. This was your mom's place. Ours, I said. I told her about the maples and the Christmas nail and the way Mom hung lights even when money was thin. Kaylee cried again, softer this time, the kind that doesn't take the knees out from under you. I liked you, Lee, she said, before I knew. I liked you too, Kaylee, I said, before and after. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. He's going to say he was protecting himself. Probably, I said. People call a lot of things protection when they mean comfort. She hugged the box to her chest like it could hold her up. Thank you, she said, for not humiliating me in front of everyone. It wasn't about you, I said. I won't let him make everything about him either. After she left, I walked 2 blocks to the cemetery with the bouquet I'd bought at the grocery. Mom's stone is under a maple, 2 smaller trees, same kind of shade. I sat on the grass and told her the headlines. We did the paper, I said. The Reverend read it. People listened. Nobody threw tomatoes. I tucked the flowers in, straightened the little flags someone else had set for Memorial Day, and set my palm on her name long enough to feel the stone cool my skin. I kept the porch, I said. I'm going to paint the kitchen. It felt like a plan and not a performance. On my way back, the neighborhood made its usual noises. Screen doors, a basketball, thumping, a dog deciding everything was fine. At the house, I pulled the front bedroom door off its pins and replaced the hinges Chuck had brought. The squeak was gone. The room breathed better. Useful work we can finish is one way to make room for the work we can't. Toward evening, Ortega texted a picture of ribs on a grill and the words, Ruth Ann says, bring your appetite. I set the table there while she told a joke about a pastor, a plumber, and a possum, none of which I remember except the way we laughed. We ate off paper plates, and afterward Ruth Ann handed me a pen. Write 3 lines, she said. Not a speech. A thing you'll be proud you said if you die before breakfast. I wrote, silence got me through the rain, paper got me through the hall. Daylight keeps. She read it, nodded, like the seam was straight, and put the paper on her fridge with a cow magnet. Back on my porch, the light clicked on when the evening did. I sat with my knees under the quilt and let the day play itself out to the small sounds tires on wet pavement, a neighbor's laugh, the mockingbird still practicing. Boundaries aren't walls. They're the edges that keep your porch sturdy. Grace isn't letting someone keep the keys. It's telling the truth without lighting the house on fire. If any part of this sat with you, if a room in your own life went quiet while you listened, share this with someone who needs a porch light more than a bonfire. Leave a note about your truth or pull up a chair next time. We'll keep the coffee hot and the stories honest.